All right, I think we're live here. Got a blue light and red light. That looks good. Again, Jesse Harris here. Robert Hill,
Hello.
Keith Fortier. I clearly am the most underdressed for this occasion. However, the material is still going to be really good because you're doing the talking and not me.
Good. You look great.
So we left it kind of last time in that last video of, hey, we're going to head to some frequently asked questions. I came away, Keith, when you were talking, like, really thinking, well, how do I actually get involved? We hit kind of some of that, support family, you could actually do it, but like, how do I do that, and what does that actually look like?
Yeah, that's good. And I think there's not one right way to get involved, and I think, and honestly, and there shouldn't be, right? Because the issue with foster care and adoption and kids that are struggling and families that are falling apart is so complex, and we need like a variety of giftings, a variety of skills, and people bringing who they are and what they're already passionate about to the problem makes a world of difference, right? And for some people that does look like being foster parents or being adoptive parents, but that's not for everybody. Not everybody should.
Yeah.
So getting them involved can be a very uniquely, a very personal experience. Like, and it should be, because the more personal it is to you, the more invested you are. And if you're doing something that feels natural for your life and who you are, then it's not forced or awkward. And we don't want like anything we do in life should feel like it flows out of just who we are. But I feel like there's this analogy in the foster care world about how to get involved, and about how complex the problem is, that I'll try and break down really quickly. But a lot of times they'll talk about the whole foster care system as if it is a river, that there's this river that's flowing. And if you imagine like the three of us on the banks of the river, we're standing at the side of the river, and all of a sudden we notice that there's thousands and thousands of children floating in the water, right? All these kids are floating in the water, and they're all heading down towards a waterfall at the end. So the three of us are right here, and you, Jesse, take off up the river to go try and find out why the heck are these kids in the water in the first place? Like, how are they getting in there?
Yeah.
Then me in the middle, I jump into the river and just start pulling out as many kids as I can, right? It's like, okay, here, who can I start grabbing, getting them out of the water? And you run down to the waterfall's edge to try and catch kids at the last minute. Be like, who can I grab that's about to go over? Which that kind of visualizes everybody in the different roles in the foster care system. You know, like, so Agape, we do foster care and adoption. Those are the people who are jumping into the middle of the river and be like, hey, let's get these kids out now. Let's try and get some restoration, like, before it gets too late. There's people who go upstream to try and figure out the systemic problems that are causing all the kids in the river, and to try and prevent families from falling apart in the first place. Like, let's prevent kids from landing in the water. And then there's the people who go downstream, which is all of the things that spin out of foster care, like, you know, addiction and incarceration, and, you know, early pregnancies and human trafficking issues and homelessness, and like all the issues that come out because when kids who are in the system go over the edge, it just feeds back into the beginning, because usually that involves more kids from all that brokenness and who end up being at the beginning of the road to begin with. So it becomes this systemic cycle. And in order for there to be a healthy system, like us at Agape, we're in the middle of the river. We're doing foster care, adoption. I'm trying to get the community involved and engaged. But I know that my part is one part, and the people next to me that are running upstream are just as important. And the people who are running downstream are just as important. And for everybody like listening to this video, what we do at the middle of the river might not be where you're called. You might be like, hey, I'm actually really stirred up about like how do we keep kids out of the river in the first place? Or I might be really stirred up to be like, okay, how do we actually end the problems that are caused because of kids who are not pulled out, you know, downstream. So finding your just right fit, and I'm not getting nitty and gritty enough at all, because like on every level there's ways to get involved and ways that feel natural for people. But that's really a first step. If you're like, hey, where do I jump in, is actually finding like where your heart is drawn. Like, where along that river do you feel like you're supposed to be standing?
Yeah.
So
I love that. I just want to. I didn't plan on saying this, but it just. I feel like I really need to. So yesterday I was reading through interviews that we've done with my research on incarcerated individuals, And I was listening to an interview that you did, and the guy finishes prison, goes through a training program, and the most valuable thing he had through the training program was processing trauma because of he went through this experience.
Yes.
And the entrepreneurial training helped, everything helped, but the most important thing that changed his life was being able to go through this program for like 6 to 9 months. He was able to like process what happened to him as a 13-year-old, and I won't go into the details. It was horrific. So what I was thinking about as you were talking is to use your waterfall analogy. If someone goes off the edge, that's actually the start of another river, like incarceration and something like that. And so all the more reason if we can prevent issues upstream, it really at a societal level, it's a monumental impact.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like our tendency is often to be like, oh my gosh, we need to get kids out of the water right now, which is important, right? We need as many people to jump into the water and start pulling kids out.
Totally.
But unless there are people who have the right skills, the right mindset, the right resources to be like, all right, let's head upstream and try and stop the flow to begin with. Like, if we don't have people who are doing that, like, or if we don't have people who are helping, process trauma or help that young man, if he didn't have people to walk that with him, then, that's what just creates the cyclical problem.
Goes through recidivism and he keeps going back in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So just to go a little bit deeper then, so we hit broad, there's lots of ways to help. How do I jump in?
Yes.
Let's say though that I did want to actually start fostering.
Yes.
Right? Like I actually want children in my home. How do I do that? Like what does that look like?
Absolutely. So there's a process, every state, and in North Carolina to become a licensed foster parent. There's it's about 30 hours of training.
Are we talking like CE, like I just jump on my computer, do modules? Is it?
No, so it's a specific licensure process, just to make sure that people are competent enough and have enough understanding. And I will say it is not nearly enough training, but it gets you licensed.
Yeah.
So there's, so at Agape, we license families individually. So we have a social worker that goes to people's house and sits with them one-on-one, gives them reading. There's 4 little booklets that they read. And then after each booklet, an Agape social worker processes, hey, what are you thinking about this?
Oh, okay. So
what's it like?
Can I stop you real quick?
Yeah.
I had the impression that it had to be like the state of North Carolina. Y'all have been knighted by the state of North Carolina to do this.
We are a certified.
I see.
So in North Carolina, you could go straight to the county office. And they will license you. And then there's other nonprofits, other agencies that we can license families. So we have certain things we have to jump through. So like certain hoops, certain things we have to hit by state standards. Like we have to talk about these things. We need to talk about a certain level of trauma training. We need to talk about, and we also need to do what's called a home study to get to know your family, so we know what's right. If you're like, if you've got 3 daughters under the age of 5, we're not gonna be like, hey, we think these teenage boys, these 4 teenage boys are the right fit for your family. But like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. Like matching the right kids with the right families is very important. So there's a home study process to get to know you, get to know what works, and then the licensing process. So licensing and home study, and once the licensing training.
I get a call, do I have to say yes to everything that comes my way, or what if we're about to go on a vacation, or what if I'm overwhelmed, or whatever? What does that look like?
You are still very much in control of your family and are free to say yes or no to each call, and each call you get, and when it feels right, to say yes. And but also knowing at the same time that having a biological child, you have 9 months to prepare and get ready. But once that child comes, it really does disrupt your life.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, actually, like everyone stops working, right? You have a leave to love that child and care for that child, and everyone starts bringing you meals, and the whole community is like, oh my gosh, you have a baby, and you're not sleeping, and that must be stressful. Well, foster parents, the world doesn't usually stop for them.
Yeah.
Right? Their phone rings, they say yes. There's never a perfect time to disrupt your life entirely. And it's usually just as disruptive.
Yeah. Man, I have never thought about it like that. I mean, because that is so wild, right?
Yeah.
We do completely pause. Like, even to the point now, it's like, if you don't get paternal leave.
12 weeks or something.
It's crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, but if you have almost the exact same experience, minus you don't have quite all the preparation, actually.
You don't have the preparation.
So it's not the same experience, but
and usually the kids have been through some sort of mess that makes it even harder or more painful as they're transitioning in.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane. Never thought about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you can start. So then, let's say I get a boy, 4 years old. So then, what happens? So then they assimilate into our family.
Yes.
But you said in the last video, the goal is that biological family gets their life straight.
Yes.
So that little boy can go back.
Yes.
Right? But there's no actual real definite. Right? So it's like, it's just limbo at some level.
Yes.
I can imagine of your heart.
Oh, well, we are by nature people who like to control all the variables of our life. And foster care brings a level of uncertainty where you don't actually know the outcome. And actually, that's exactly what these children need, right? They need us to love them really well, regardless of the outcome, which is challenging. Because your heart is kind of in limbo where you're like, I actually don't know which way this is going. But yeah, so this child comes, and the goal, more often than not, I mean, there are 4,000 kids in North Carolina who are never going home. And that's already been decided. And those kids who come to your home, and you know that they're staying.
Yeah.
You can adopt those children, get matched with one of those kids. And you still have to be a foster parent to do that. So you become a licensed foster parent. You get matched with one of the kids who are waiting to be adopted. There's a 6-month period where you are their foster home, and then the adoption process starts.
I see.
Even though they know that child is never going to go to biological family. So, but say that child comes in a very typical situation, meaning like there was neglect, abuse. For some reason, the authorities were like, these kids are not safe. We need to get them out. And then there's now an open court case over that child's life that's determining what is right for that child. There's social workers and attorneys, all kinds of people who are watching that child and watching their family, trying to support their family, trying to get them healthy, whatever that looks like. And you are now also kind of in the middle of this. There are social workers who come about once a month to visit the children and find out how they're doing. Lawyers that will call and just ask, like, hey, what's going on? How are they doing?
Can I pause real quick? So social worker, is that social worker from the state? Social worker from Agape? If you're working with Agape?
That's a good question. So if you are an Agape foster home, your family has an Agape social worker whose job is to care for you, to help you navigate the system, to explain all of the confusing things that are happening, to advocate and make sure things are done correctly, because sometimes in this messy system it's not done correctly. So you have an Agape social worker, and then that child has a social worker who is assigned to them, whose job is to care for that child and try and point everything in the direction of what is right for that child. So often Agape social workers will try and visit at the same time as that other social worker, just so that everybody's on the same page. But yeah, once a month visit from social workers, supposed to be quarterly meetings from lawyers and attorneys, court cases that you don't always have to go to, sometimes have to go to, but you get caught up in a system where you are now the person who knows this child the best. And people don't always want to hear, even though you know what is best, but it's a sweet place to be able to advocate in the midst of the system for the child. But yeah, it's a messy court process that you're now a part of.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
It is, for sure.
So how do you navigate that? If you're a new foster parent, I mean, you said the word trauma. It sounds like maybe the parents are also experiencing some measure of change, maybe loss of feeling of control, uncertainty.
Yes.
How do you navigate some of those new feelings and?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I think a lot of people who come to foster care and adoption, they tend to have this feeling, or they were drawn to foster adoption because of compassion, and they really feel moved. They want to do something, but also deep down they kind of feel like a super parent, where they're like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna swoop in. Got my cape. I've raised a couple kids. I've done it pretty well. I'm gonna swoop this child out of the river. They're gonna come into my beautiful home with my beautiful family, where we eat our family dinners, and all of their pain and all of their trauma they've been through will melt away because now they are safe and now they are loved. But typically, more often than not, foster parents, they find that when they've stepped in, when they pulled that child out of the river, what it really actually felt like was, it felt more like they just climbed into it with them. That they just literally climbed into their pain, climbed into their story, climbed into a system that's chaotic and confusing, that this child is caught up in. And even the physical trauma that child has been through, and the way that child's brain and body have been impacted because of their trauma, is now becomes your burden, that you start really hoping for healing, and it affects you very deeply. Yeah. So it is, and that's why foster parents need significant support.
Well, I was just about to ask, because I'm thinking through. I don't know really truly if I am ready to say I'm a foster parent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah.
I like see the need. I understand.
Yeah.
So if you're me.
Yeah.
But I do want to be a part.
Yes.
I would love to be a part of the kid's life at some level.
Yes.
But I don't know if I'm ready yet for a kid in my home all the time.
Yes.
So how do you support?
How do you show up? You gotta start showing up. I don't know, and it's hard and it's humbling. So just start showing up to care for them. Or if you're a person who feels really drawn upriver, it's like there are great organizations that are getting involved with single moms who are on the verge of losing their kids. And it's like, get involved, become a mentor, just start showing up. You can once a month start showing up for a mom who's struggling. Like, just be somebody who's like, okay, I don't need to foster, but how can I actually get some skin in the game? Because that's what I hear from all the nonprofits, all the organizations that are trying to make a difference. They're like, there's too many people who are on the sidelines, and we just need more people to do something. It doesn't have to be everything. You're like, man, I can't, like, and maybe you will foster if you start getting involved. And you're like, this is not actually like this. I can do this, but you got to get closer to it and start watching other people's lives by supporting somebody, by helping. Just get some skin in the game, even if it's a little bit.
So what I just heard is we have a newer foster family at our church.
Yeah.
Right? So if I simply just said, hey man, I'm coming over, I'm going to be bringing dinner.
Yeah.
You just tell me what you want, I'll pick it up. And is it like, hey, we'd love to hang and hear how it's going? Right? Or is it like a, hey, we don't want to cause more, because you know, like, yes. So is it better to just be like, hey, what's going on? Like, I'd love to hang for 30 minutes to hear how it's going.
Yeah, I would bring that dinner, and then if it was me, I would say, what else can I do for you? Okay. Like, what else is going on? Like, that family, you know, say they have 2 daughters that are displaced in their home, like, they're probably like, I mean, I've had times where I'm like, even just bathing a child who has showed up in my house, I'm like, this is complicated. Sometimes they've never been bathed.
Like really?
Like they've never had the experience of someone like cleaning them, or cleaning or if you have, honestly, there's times where we've had foster parents who have like 10 or 12-year-olds, and like no one ever talked to them about how to actually like shampoo their hair, and you're having these like messy conversations. You're like, I didn't know, no one's told me like I was going to be doing this, and like, and they're overwhelmed, and it's like, meanwhile the dishes are piling up in the sink and the laundry's, and they're having all these crazy conversations or doing these things that nobody like was expecting. You're like, hey, bring a meal, how can I help? What's stressing you right now? What's something that's on your mind tonight that you have to get done, and just do it for them. And then semi-regularly, you'll start to be in the story with them. And even more than the meal and the help is foster parents need people who will be in their story, where it's like, because then 4 months down the road from now, when they're so overwhelmed, there's already people who have been in it.
Yes. I laugh, and I could just see the scenariio where it's like, I feel like as humans, we can handle things until finally you're like, I can't do this.
Yes.
And then somebody that can know, oh, I've seen it building, but at one level I can't.
And here's the thing about people who've been in it and seen it building. If you've been in it, if you've been showing up once a week and bringing a meal and offering to help and listening, you'll start to notice that they're going to break before they do. Before they're saying, Uncle, we need serious help. You already noticed that they need serious help, and you can start to activate more people in the community. You can get more serious help there. Because foster parents struggle to ask for help. Because they kind of feel like, well, I chose this. I thought I was going to be good enough for it. I need to be able to bear it on my own. And because of all these weird like psychological dynamics, they don't ask for help until it's way too late. So people need to be in their life and be like, oh, you need help.
Basically forcing them to take the help. And we all need that. I mean, we can talk about a lot of scenarios where we try to act like we're better than we are.
Well, I mean, it's like a lot of times especially for foster parents who are like, no, we're going to be good, it's fine. I'll use the analogy like, well, foster care is kind of like the raging sea, and you're about to be thrown over into the raging sea, and it's like, people who want to love you and support you, that's the life jacket. Put it on before you get thrown over. So then once you're like, wait a second, I think I'm drowning, you're already wearing a life jacket. You've already got people in your corner. So that's what like support is. And that's the difference it really does make. It keeps people from going under.
When I think I hear that and I go, I can manage that. But it does, I mean, we have 4 kids, but it still does put a kink in my life. Saying, hey, we're all loading up. We're going to go hang out at this family's house once a week. Or even every other week, right? It's still a lift. It's not compared to, but what I'm hearing is, it's not compared to the actual foster parents. But what I'm hearing is that lift is worth it.
Oh, yes.
Like, it matters.
Oh, it matters. It makes a world of difference. It matters for that family, but also I believe it matters for you and for your kids. Like, it is going to make a difference in your life when you start to show up. And even just starting to engage in those stories. Like, I don't want my kids to grow up in a world where they think that everybody has a life that's warm and fuzzy and parents that love them and tuck them in at night. Like, I want my kids to know that the world is a real place with real pain. And there are good people who are doing something about it, and we're going to be one of those good people. So I want my kids showing up and being a part of that story. I want them finding out how to serve and love and help. So it makes a difference for us, and it makes a difference for the people who come along with us, and it makes a big difference for the families who have said, okay, here I am, I'm all in. Because they need people to be all in with them to support them in it. So
it's powerful, man.
It is.
So, like, what about, I've heard some people say this too, like, am I ever too old? Like, am I too old to jump in and start helping? Is this like a young person's game? You have to be really energetic, or like, what about that?
Oh, you are never too old, right? There's never too old to make a difference. And I mean, I'll tell you a story. How about when we were starting fostering? This was about 10 years ago. We were just at the beginning of becoming foster parents. We just had our first placement. Little girl, 11 months old, horrifically malnourished. She had been basically alone for the first 11 months of her life in her crib. And we were just overwhelmed. This girl needed so much physical care, but also just the social and the cognitive things that didn't happen. And also, it got, long story, but it got complicated. But there was this woman in our church, probably about 75, that we did not really know. but she was a woman in church who had seen her, and she reached out. She's like, hey, I just really feel like I should help your family, but I just don't know what I could possibly do. And we were like, okay, well, you can pray for us. And she was like, yeah, well, obviously I'm going to pray for you, but I need to do more. I feel like I need to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, well, why not just start coming over once a month? We'll just see what happens. So she would bring dinner, and she'd come over once a month and eat with us. And none of our kids knew her. There's proximity, but we didn't know her well. And then we just kind of fell into this rhythm where she would read a book to each of our kids and pray with each of our kids and listen to them. So, like, her name was Diane. And so each of our kids would sit with her, choose a book, and read and talk with her. And then it'd be like, next kid's turn. And she would do this, like, month after month. And then, like, 6 months in, she kind of came to us and she was like, am I actually doing anything that helps you? Are you, like, am I even making a difference? And we're like, are you making a difference? We're like, the nights that you are in our home are the most peaceful night of the month.
That's awesome.
Like, all of the mayhem level just comes, like, right
That's
down.
amazing.
Our kids feel loved and connected. We're able to give everybody else better one-on-one attention. I have 6 kids, by the way. So there's just a lot in the evening, right? So we're like, you bring us food, and the food is amazing. We don't have to cook. And, like, it is our kids' favorite night of the month when you come. And she was like, really? She's like, well, it's actually my favorite night of the month, too.
That's awesome.
She's like, can I start coming twice a month? And we're like, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. So she starts coming twice a month. And, our kids start calling her, instead of Diane, Miss Diane, they start calling her Auntie Di-Di. She became Auntie Di-Di to our family, and she came twice a month. And then after the kids were in bed, she would hang out. She would, like, fold laundry with me and my wife, talk to us, listen about what's going on in the case, listen to what's going on in our home, what's stressing us. And then you flash forward, like, a year and a half down the road, and she's been coming now for a long time. Now she's like family.
Wow.
And we hit a really rough spot in our foster care journey where, like, we had a really intense case where we took on a lot of trauma from what these kids had gone through, and we were broken. Like, my wife and I, like, when I mean broken, like, I was, like, started developing facial tics. I couldn't, like, think clearly because how much stress my mind was under. I just, like, couldn't work. I felt like a horrible dad because I was just under so much stress. And, like, who do you think was the person that actually saved our butts and loved us so well in the midst of it? Right? It was Auntie Dot, right? Because she had a year and a half of history of just loving our family and just caring for us so well. She was the one who cared for us and cried with us and prayed with us and all the things that we needed. And we're like, all because she's like, I just feel like I'm supposed to show up.
I love it, man.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I feel like I'm supposed to show up. Right? And then all the things that we got, and then she went through a hard season where she was sick, and our kids got to be the ones at her side, loving her, and it's like, it's the way that community is supposed to be.
That story is so wonderful.
Yeah. So it's like, you're never too old to do something. And then also, like, another little side note is, like, there's a whole group of people who are like, hey, I have raised my kids, I've launched them, I'm too old to foster. But they're like, wait a second, you're not too old, because there's this group of kids who are launching, right? So the 18 to 21-year-old range are kids who can sign themselves back into foster care. They can get support for 3 more years.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So there's older folks, 65, 70, 80 years old, and like, I'm going to be a foster parent for kids who are going to college.
That's great.
And they're like, you just need to be a place where they can come back on their breaks, someone to call when they have, like, a bad day or a test that they screwed up and they're stressed. Like, and that's less like parenting, and it's more just like being a mentor.
Yeah, you're a mentor.
Like a coach. Somebody
Safe
who's
place
like,
for them to land.
gonna cheer them. Yeah, cheer them on. Like, and those kids, and there's not enough people who are doing it, by the way. A lot of those kids who are signing themselves back into care, they're getting support. Like, they're getting college paid for. They're getting all kinds of support from the state and from counties, but they're not getting the support of a parent who will love them and cheer for them.
Yeah.
And there's so many older people who are catching on, like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Yeah.
And it's life-giving, and for them and for the kids that they're going to love. And a lot of times these kids who are launching and going to college, they just become like family, right? They don't have anyone to come back to. These kids, they just start showing up every Thanksgiving. They just come back. They just become family because they've got nobody else.
Yeah.
That just seems like a perfect way for a new retiree that is wanting to say, what am I going to do with my time? Because, I mean, some of the people we've talked to, they grind in the corporate world, they work hard, their days are structured, and then ta-da, they're done, they've retired, and then it's kind of like, okay, what now?
Yeah, but what am I doing?
Yeah, that just seems like such a value add for such a limited amount of time, really to be able to make a difference in someone's life.
Oh, huge difference.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, and the youth, the young adults who are aging out, the trajectory of their life is so radically different when people decide to get involved during those years.
Just those 3 years.
Yeah. Instead of just having them off on their own with nobody.
Yeah.
It's like you change the whole
story. It
story.
makes so much sense. I mean, it does. The development that's going on in that time frame.
Yes.
Yeah. Man.
Yep.
And you have a friend too.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably are looking for more friends. Because I mean, that's cool.
All right, so I think I've gone over probably 15 minutes. We're trying to keep this to 10 minutes.
So it was a good conversation. This was fun.
If you're watching this on YouTube and you see how long it is, just put it on like 1.5.
There you go.
When you start crying about Auntie Di, then you may want to slow it down. But we'll wrap this one up. I think that love to get one more with you, Keith. Just really where we get to kind of hit on the more financial aspects of this side of things, just because that's what we do. And so, but we've really enjoyed this again, and I look forward to the next one.
It's good. Me too.
Thanks, Keith. That was great.